it feels like what you were doing is you're like, okay, I'm looking for the perfect answer, and this isn't the perfect answer, so it can't be this.
My name's Stephen Summers. I'm an MS4 at University of Colorado. Ophthalmology has been my dream since I was a kid. Right now, a 258 is average to match into Ophtho, and my most recent practice score was 251, which was like a 10-point jump. What's getting in my way right now is question interpretation and approach, which has led me to get a lot of questions wrong that I would otherwise get right.
The difference between a 230 and a 260 is maybe a little bit more knowledge, but a lot more interpretation, right? It's just eliminating unforced errors, right? Things where you're like, you see it afterwards, you're like, oh my God, I knew that. How did I get that wrong, right? So
Yeah.
there was a student we had I think maybe 1 year ago, where she also in ophthalmology, she started at a 210 and 3 months later she got a 268. And that was largely, I mean, yeah, she improved knowledge too. Don't get me wrong. Like definitely her knowledge improved. And I would say that the thing that really carried her for the last like 30 points was interpretation. Right. And I remember all we did was like every week she would just meet and she'd be like, okay, tell me, watch me read questions and tell me what I'm doing wrong. So we're going to do a truncated version of that. I want to see the questions you got wrong, and I'm going to try to like, let's try and spot the pattern for like, what's the biggest thing that you're doing that if you were to address it would improve your score. A 15-year-old girl is brought to the ED by her mother because of a 2-week history of heavy vaginal bleeding. I see. Okay. So she said menarche, normal time, menses occurs. Okay, so she's okay. Anyway, she's got a super low platelet count. And so they say, what is the most likely diagnosis? And you said TTP, and the correct answer was ITP.
Presentation is like relatively mild, which would lean more towards ITP. And that's initially what I was thinking. But then I saw she has a fever of 100.4. And one of the criteria for TTP is fever. And the way I had learned that is that the other ones are less likely to present with fever. So I went and I chose that one because 100.4 is technically a fever, but it's the very lower end. And I didn't know. And there wasn't enough stuff to lead me towards TTP otherwise. But I remember like in a video, we said like, don't choose answers based off of the absence of evidence. So I said, that's one thing that could point towards it. And IATP is like a diagnosis of exclusion. So because she has a fever, we're excluding it and going with TTP.
It almost feels like you were being the lawyer, not the judge for this one. Instead of being like, okay, well, this sounds a lot like ITB, but it's not perfect, so it can't be ITP. I don't think either of us would argue that this is classic of either of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot closer to the classic of one and not the other.
And I've done this with other stuff too, like a patient who shows obvious signs of schizophrenia, but her roommates only noticed it for the last 3 months. So it's not schizophrenia because it's only been there for 3 months, but schizophreniform is not an answer choice. So then I'm like, I don't know what to do because schizophrenia should be 6 months or more. So then I got that question wrong too.
Really common. That's really, really, really common. Because, and I think, I've thought a lot about this. I think that what happens is that people, like, especially high academic achievers, oftentimes we get used to eliminating answer choices because they're not perfect. And that works well in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been kind of trained to do this. And the problem is that when you now have a task where the signal is weaker and the noise is louder, you can't use that same technique.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm struggling with. I think there's that, but then there's the opposite side of things too, where it's like I had mentioned, like, oh, here's some noise that they're putting in, and only a student who gets 265 or higher would notice this. So obviously their celiac panel came back negative, but they might be IgA deficient. So that makes sense.
Can I push back on a couple beliefs?
Please do.
So you shouldn't put yourself in a different category of like, you didn't say this, but I kind of get a flavor of this of like, oh, a 265 person would be able to pick up on this.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really how it works. The difference between like, I don't know, I'm not a basketball player, so I don't actually know if this is true, but I imagine that like the difference between like Steph Curry when he shoots versus like someone else when they shoot, yes, his form is like they're at someone else's best. They could probably have the right form that what Steph Curry is doing. It's just that they're not as consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like on a good day, they might have just as good of a form, let's say, right? But it's like, it's because they're just not as consistent with it. And so it's not that he's doing something spectacular. He's just doing it reliably. The same thing is true with the 260. They're not necessarily smarter. Like when you talk to them, because I don't know, yesterday, like the last 48 hours, we've had one person in the 260s, one in the 250s, and two in the 240s that I've just spoken with. I just happened to speak with in the last 48 hours. So it's like, okay. Honestly, when you talk to them, you couldn't tell who had better knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's different is the one that is in the 260s has just been better at being more consistent. Right. She
Yeah.
when you review her answers, she gets the same run wrongs as the other people that are really hard. Like legitimately, she got the same questions wrong on the NBME as the other people. But then she skipped a lot of the other ones that they missed because she missed the hard ones, but she got all the easy ones.
Hmm.
That's what a 260 looks like, honestly. It's not like,
Okay.
oh, you have this exceptional knowledge. And so oh, that really rare question that no. If you can get those hard ones to 50-50, that's what a 260 looks like. Right? Is that you're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to give it my best shot. I recognize that the answer will not feel perfect, and I'm just going to choose the answer that feels better, not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that the best answer oftentimes will feel a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Like there was a student we had. I've told this story however many times, but he went from failing to the 260s on his step 1 NBMEs in 2 months. He walked out of step 1 super confident, obnoxiously so. He went into step 2 with the same NBME scores, like 260s. It might even been higher, like 270s. He walked out crying. It was the same NBMEs going in. It was the same person. He was even
Mm-hmm.
better at question interpretation, but he came out crying on step 2. So you're close. I mean, you can probably feel it. You're close. The way that you're going to get there, though, it's what's hard is that what gets you to the 230s is not what gets you to the 260s. What gets you to the 230s is knowledge, usually. And so the issue is that people extrapolate that out and they're like, oh, well, I must just learn more. And they lean more into that. The problem is then they get into the messy ones. And they're like, then they start to overread the noise. So this is, I think, important to hear because what you can see people make massive jumps in their score in a short period of time. Like we've had students go from 230s to 260s in 2 weeks. If you're a medical student or a doctor preparing for either the USMLEs or COMLEX or one of your medical board exams, then be sure to sign up for our free 14-step program where we'll walk you through the most efficient ways for you to improve your score in a short period of time. And if you're interested in getting there faster, be sure to book a free call with our team where we'll break down what it is that's holding you back and, if it makes sense, explain how it is that we can help you to get there more efficiently. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way that you can get 30 points worth of knowledge in 2 weeks. It's not possible, right? But it is possible to, right? Because they're just making systematic errors. But this is one of them. It's an expectation problem. You just have to know that the game you're playing is a different game. All right, let's look at this one. All right, so a 6-year-old man comes to the ED 6 hours after the onset of shortness of breath with non-productive cough. He had hypertension a year ago. Okay, great. So you said so. He's got an S3 and an S4 and crackles bilaterally in his bases. And he's got jugular venous dissension. I see. So you thought amyloidosis. The correct answer was CHF, which you actually crossed off. So what was your thought process here?
So I read through it. I think I was reading through it a little bit too fast because I saw ophthalmoscopic exam. I was like, oh, arterial or narrowing. So he's got hypertension. And I think I was reading this way too fast, but no papilledema. So I'm thinking he's probably got chronic hypertension. And this is heart failure. So heart failure with hypertension, no peripheral edema, S3, S4.
So JVD and crackles in the lungs. If I told you that, what would you say?
That could be so much stuff, but some kind of heart failure that's probably left heart failure first, causing
right,
pulmonary
exactly.
edema.
Left and right heart failure. So they gave you a pretty classic presentation for heart failure, but because of the S4. Now, in fairness, heart failure can give you an S4, right? The
Yeah,
heart dilates enough.
it can.
It's actually a really bad sign if you've got an S4. That
Yeah.
said, I don't want you to litigate that. That's not the reason that you got this question wrong. The reason you got this wrong is because in your head, I think that you're being too restrictive of you're being a little bit too deterministic. If
Mhm.
for if the sign is not classic or in your head it's not classic, it must be wrong.
Yeah.
Now, you got to be careful because there are signs that will contradict something. So, for example, if you are thinking, oh, this is a STEMI and they don't have a troponin leak, or rather, like, let's say that you think it's unstable angina and there's like a troponin, like a really high troponin, it is no longer unstable angina,
Hmm.
right? Because by definition, you've got necrosis. There are some
Yeah.
things where by definition, like, it will change the definition of the thing by it being there, right? However, for most things, it's not like that. Like, what we think of as the classic criteria for something are usually not the actual diagnostic criteria. So for heart failure, an S4 is neither a like thing for or against heart failure, right? You can either rule in or rule out heart failure based on the presence or absence of an S4, technically, right? It
Hmm.
may not be classic with most forms of heart failure, but you can't use the fact that it's not classic for it as like, oh, okay, like I can throw this out now. You have to be comfortable emotionally with choosing an answer that doesn't feel perfect. Like that student that cried after coming out of his test after scoring 260s on his practice tests.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say right now to make sure I'm picking up what you're throwing down is it's okay to choose an imperfect answer if you
It's
think that
actually
it could be
expected
right.
to choose. That's exactly right. It's actually expected that you choose an imperfect answer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because like that's like kind of what's been how I think of putting it together. Like congestive heart failure. I feel like I understand congestive heart failure very well, and because
Yep.
it didn't fit my perfect expectation, I
Yeah.
ruled it out. And I'm less familiar with cardiac amyloidosis.
Yes.
So because I'm less familiar with it, that might mean that it's more correct
Yeah. That's
because
right.
I'm less familiar with it than the
Yeah.
one that it would be okay.
That's
And I
right.
think I'm making that mistake a lot.
You want to go into the test knowing that you will be okay under any circumstance. Because when you stop worrying about the outcome, you stop worrying on the test in the process. And when you're not so worried about the process, then that noise is a little bit less bothersome. I've just seen this a lot. Like we had a student, really high stakes. Again, I've told the story a lot, but she was a MIT graduate. She failed step one twice, and if she failed a third time, she'd get kicked out of medical school. So much higher stakes than yours, to be honest. And so what happened is we went through that process of like, what would you do with your life? She would get kicked out. She was like, well, but I go back to being a teacher. Isn't my first choice? No. And immediately she started to feel more confident because she's like, you know what? I'll be fine. Obviously, it's not the first choice. And guess what? She
Hmm.
passed. Now she's in clerkships. So it's the same thing, right? Like you want to go in with that mentality because you can have fun with this test. Like this test should feel enjoyable. That's what you want. That's what a 260 feels like. Is like, okay, like, you know, like, yeah, you hit me, you punched me in the face, like I'm gonna get you next time or whatever, right? Like, like go in kind of like with a playful mentality of like, oh man, ooh, I really am not sure about the noise on that one. Like, all right, game on.
Would you recommend that I spend the next 2.5 weeks just like really hammering questions so that I can
Yes.
practice the question interpretation?
Yeah.
Or should I spend more time like really mastering content still?
I mean, you can do both. Like, I'm sure there's still gaps, and I would still spend at least half of my time working on question interpretation. I would mix in like NBMEs, like shelf NBMEs, full NBMEs, but like USMLE style questions, like actually written by the NBME, so that you can get used to their style of noise and stuff like that. If you're putting in the hours but your knowledge isn't accumulating, it's not about studying more. It's about building a system where nothing you learn gets forgotten. In this video, I break down the exact framework to make that happen and get you on track for a 260 plus in step 2. Click here to watch it next.